What?
I don't think she's going to be watching the video. She's there for a
Aaron. Where was Julie sitting?
back by me.
Is that my old one? That's the new one?
Behind that.
How come this new one says Grady is there and Fred's in the back? That's the old one?
Well,
Oh, did he not get
Fred
the
couldn't
good
see
one?
because he
doesn't have his
glasses.
That's the only switch?
Yep. Well, Kevin. No, he has the new one. But originally on the new one, Brady was there, but he didn't. Oh.
Where was Matt sitting? There? Okay. No questions? Aaron? I did what? Because you didn't give an example or what? Yeah, that would apply. So you're missing the two. Gotta find talent treasurers, and when you're missing treasure, then explain why treasure, how you're doing it that. What? You lost a point for not putting your name on it. Other questions? Mary?
What was the bonus on
I don't know which test I gave back.
Chapter 13.
Mark chapter 12.
Chapter 13.
I had 12 when I did.
Gave the answer right back here. You guys are attentive.
Oh.
Matthew 22 verse 37 to 39. It's written right there.
I did Matthew.
That was one of them. It's also in Mark 12. It's also in Luke 10. And part of it's in Deuteronomy 6:5. Now, I didn't grade your treaty thing very closely, okay? Because many of you colored these spots that were supposed to be white. What are those white spots for?
Oh.
Oh.
What are these white spots?
Reservations.
Those are reservations. Okay, those are reservations, so they didn't get seeded over. So the whites still belong to the Native Americans, unless they sold it. But a lot of you, if you see an arrow or something, a line across, usually meant you should have colored that all that color. Okay, any other questions? So who can tell me what the reading was about?
The dates of like the treaty that was signed?
Okay, the different treaties that were signed. And then your book also kind of divided up who were the people, who were the occupants, or those that were part of the process. And what did they want in each? So who were the people that were part of the process?
So the one Native American that I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it like starts with a W and it's really long. William Warren? No.
I'm not looking for specifics, okay? So one are the natives, okay? The Native Americans, that's one of the groups. Who else would be interested in these treaties? Okay, the settlers, who we called what? Newcomers. Now I saw one, I haven't checked recently, I saw one of the poems done already. Did somebody else do a poem that I didn't miss yet? So some of you done the poem already? Anybody do 2 poems?
I did both.
Jackson.
Oh, I did.
Did we just have to like write it on here or did we have to do it?
You have to write it on there, perform it on Flipgrid. If you're doing the bonus, you have to perform both of them on Flipgrid.
Perform, okay.
I am French.
Okay? So yeah, the Native American settlers, who else?
Mexican? No. I don't know. Oh!
Mia. The who? They're part of the settlers, right? Aaron.
Traders.
Okay, the fur traders. Who else? The missionaries. And who else?
Voyagers.
They'd be part of that group. Again, the voyagers don't really care about stuff, they only care about what?
Boating.
Surviving and getting their meal and getting a little pay. Kennedy. The government officials. So, these are the groups that are involved in this treaty. And the main treaty we're going to talk about is which one? Treaty of Traverse des Sioux. You can go down and see the site where they did it. Anybody been there? Anybody know where it's at?
Here. Falls?
Minnesota Lake.
The first treaty in 1805 was for Fort Snelling. Treaty of Traverse des Sioux wasn't signed at Fort Snelling. It was signed in Mankato. Well, St. Peter, really, right outside Mankato. They can drive and they have a museum there now. Okay, so what did the Native Americans want out of the deal?
They're traders.
What were they looking for and why did they sign it in the first place?
Money.
Why did they want money?
So they can buy this.
What was the money called? They were looking for the annuities. And that was money and what else?
Treaties.
Money and food. Money and food, that's what they were looking for, because they were beginning to starve. Why were they starving? Okay, there wasn't enough to hunt anymore. Why wasn't there enough to hunt?
Because everyone wanted the furs in there.
Well, part of it had to do with the furs, but hunting, really, the biggest part of being successful hunting is wild animals like to be, or what?
No, there isn't very many people.
There aren't very many people. And as people began to pour into Minnesota, okay, the animals left. So they were needing, they said, we need to keep our people alive. What did the settlers want? So they want the land. Okay, it's all about the land. What did the fur traders want?
Fur.
What?
Money.
Well, again, this is about the time the fur trade is what? It's going down. They're gonna change from these beaver hats to what? Silk hats. But the natives were still trading with the fur traders. They were still bringing stuff, and some of them didn't have enough furs to cover because they didn't. So what did they do?
They killed them or what?
They kind of wrote an IOU. So it's like credit. They say, we'll let you can get stuff out of our fur trading thing, and then they promised what?
We'll bring back the fur.
Then when we get our annuities, we'll what? We'll pay it off.
It's debt.
Okay? Okay, what did the missionaries want?
Indians to change their religion.
So they wanted the Indians to become Christians. And the problem with this, again, we said, was that they were ethnocentric, right? Meaning what?
They find their
They
culture
believe
better.
their culture was the best.
So they believed their culture was the best. So they thought this was best. So they thought just you could become Christians, but they also believed they needed to do what? What the Native Americans need to do to become Christians.
They needed to praise them.
Basically, give up their entire culture. Because of this ethnocentrism. We said, you need to take up our culture. You need to get rid of your culture. So it's kind of a negative spot. These missionaries really came to do good, but a lot of them ended up what? Doing bad things. Although they cared about the Native Americans, different than any of these other groups. Okay? Most of these other groups did not care about the Native Americans. The missionaries did. They just had, again, a cloud over their eyes, just like we all do, when we think our culture is the best and we can't learn from another culture. Okay, what did the government officials want?
Be government officials. To build a wall. To find the COVID in.
To keep making these treaties.
Why?
Well, it's like land for the settlers, 'cause more and more were coming.
So the government officials basically wanted Minnesota to become what?
State.
So they wanted Minnesota to become a state. And to become a state, it took what?
10,000 people? No.
So, so if we go to, let's look at that in your book. Page. First step of statehood is always what first? Got to become a territory first. But when did we become a territory? 2 dates you have to remember, that's one of them.
1849.
Turn to page 94. I guess we haven't read this one yet, but turn to page 94. For a service or a check?
Oh my God.
Page 94. So in 1897, the Northwest Ordinance set the process how public lands north of the Ohio River and east of the Mississippi became territories or states. So first you got to become a territory. So to become a territory, and we started this process when? 1849. That's the date you have to remember, okay? That's when we became a territory. That means we met these requirements. So what are the requirements? You guys just looking at it, right? 94? Page 94, you with me? Who's with me? Page 94. What's the requirement? Lucas.
Must have 5,000 adults living in
You gotta have 5,000 people there. And we had just under 5,000. Okay? Then what? You gotta have a convention. What's a convention?
group of people.
So you gotta meet together. A big group of people meet together, and they're gonna elect somebody to do what?
From the legislature.
To go to Congress.
Oh, yeah.
Where's Congress?
New York.
Washington, D.C. So they're gonna send a person to Washington, D.C. And who'd they select? Henry Sibley. Does that name sound familiar?
Yeah.
It should be. He's gonna be one of our governors. It's also, there's a school named after him, okay? So they met in Stillwater, because Stillwater was a big settlement at that time. What, and we'll learn this a little bit later, but what does Stillwater have?
It has a Stillwater. It has a really cool park, and it has all these.
That's what it has today, but what did it have that people would want to settle around Stillwater?
Birds. Water that's
Okay,
still.
it has a river. What river's there? What? Lake Superior's not around Stillwater.
Minnesota?
Nope. It's a
Wow,
little,
Matt.
well, I guess that Minnesota kind of joins a little below that.
You know the Minnesota River?
It has good soil because it's by a river.
There's lots of forests around, was a lot of forests around Stillwater. The lumber industry began around Stillwater. Okay? We're not gonna make it to that chapter. There's a whole chapter on the lumber industry. So then the last part then is what? So you have a convention, you have a representative. And then what? So step 1, step 2, step 3. What's step 3? So if I ask you on this test, what are the 3 steps to become a territory? So Congress basically creates it, saying Minnesota can be a territory. Now, do we have any say in what's happening in the United States?
Actually,
No.
yeah.
You can talk about it, but as far as a vote or anything, this representative that goes, does he have a vote?
No.
He's only there to do what?
Represent.
Yeah, what's that mean, represent?
To have a say for the territory.
Yeah, he's gonna pursue, so if the Congress is thinking about a law that would be beneficial to Minnesota, he's gonna say what?
Do it if it's.
Yeah, do this law. If they're thinking about a law that would be bad for Minnesota,
Don't do it.
saying, don't do it. So he's representing Minnesota interests at Congress. Okay? So it's important to understand these different viewpoints because they're quite different when they come to coming up with the treaty. So we're going to watch a couple of videos on the treaty. One was put by, I think, some sixth graders made it for a history project for History Day. Or eighth graders, I'm not sure, but it's very good. So we're going to watch that video and a couple other short videos on that, on the treaty. Okay? And then we're going to look at starting, once the treaty's made, once the treaty's passed hands like you have on your sheets, what happened in Minnesota? How long did it take us then to become a state?
20 years. No.
So this is the territory. When do we become a state? That's the other date you have to remember. Lucas.
1851.
No, that's when they signed the treaty.
1805. 1858.
1858. So in less than 10 years, we moved from a territory to a state. If you go to the next page, or 99, let's go to 99. This tells you what has to happen for to become a state, and how quickly Minnesota became a state. In fact, let's turn to page 91 real quick. Let's read this one together. Page 91. Till about 1850, most of the people living in Minnesota were Indians, Dakota and Ojibwe. But by the 1860s, white settlers were the majority. The speed with which white settlers took over the land was incredible. At one time of the signing of the treaties of Traverse des Sioux and Mendota in 1851, there were 6,000 white people. So 3 years later, there's 30,000. So 5 times as many people coming out. And why were they coming out? So it was the fastest growing place in the U.S. Why were they coming? We just said this the other day. Soil, water,
Fertile soil.
soil, water, one other resource,
Wood.
wood. Okay?
Wow.
So let's look at the treaty. And again, the last part of this chapter that did I assign all the chapter? 83 of chapter 6. Well, 84 through 80, the last part basically is talking about how each of the different groups felt about the treaty. Okay? You can look at that to help you write your poem. In fact, I encourage you to, if if you've already written your poem, fine, but you might get some ideas, because these are actual quotes from some of the groups that were involved in the treaty, and some of the people that were involved in the treaty. You might even get some names. You could be one of those names. Does anybody have questions about the poem? Okay, so we're gonna look at that video. Videos, I guess. I got 3 of them.
We're watching a lot of videos.
Are you? What else you watch video for?